Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Tealand Knits Knitting Podcast. My name's Natasha. I'm from the UK, but I live on a tropical island called Sri Lanka with my husband Bob. So I'm going to change the format of my podcast this week a little bit because I thought about it and I thought when I listen or when I watch a knitting podcast, I really like to get straight into the knitting. That is the first thing that I want to do. I want to see what other people are knitting. I want to hear about their projects, their works in progress, and then I like to hear a little bit more about what they've been up to and what other things they've got going on later on in the podcast. So I thought, why don't I do what I actually enjoy? So I'm going to do that. I actually really need a little sip of my water. I'm just drinking some soda water at the moment. Love soda water. And I had a little problem with my audio. I have just recorded this entire podcast and then I had a listen and it didn't record sound. It did for about 5 minutes and then it cut out and then there was just silence. So I was a little bit upset, but anyway, I'm trying again and hopefully the sound is audible this time. But yes, I wanted to dive straight into my knitting. So this is still a work in progress. It shouldn't be, but it is. I am still knitting on my jumper. This is the sort of jumper with the T cable that runs down the front of it. And I'm really happy with it. I just tried it on before I started recording and it is fitting nicely. It's not the right size, as in it doesn't fit to exactly the right dimensions yet, but I think that the reason for that is because this yarn grows when you block it, and I haven't blocked it yet because I'm still knitting on it. So I think it will grow widthways a bit more, and so then that will make the whole thing sort of relax and loosen up. And also I think the yarn itself will loosen up a little bit. The other thing I have noticed is I knit the sleeve. So I have knit one sleeve because that was my goal for last week. My goal was to knit both sleeves, at least finish knitting the jumper. Not necessarily weaving the ends and block it, but I wanted to finish knitting it so that I could sort of check the sizing and everything. I didn't. I managed to do one sleeve though, and I did it yesterday. I cast on something else because I was excited and I just really, when you just get something in your mind and you just have to cast it on. So I did that, and then I thought yesterday, oh, I've got the podcast to record. I didn't manage to record because usually I record on a Thursday, and I didn't manage to record it yesterday. So I thought anyway, I'll start the sleeve because I want to show you that I've made some progress on it, and ended up finishing it because this yarn is, even though it's advertised as DK weight, it is actually, in my opinion, it knits to sort of a worsted weight gauge. So I think my gauge is like 6 rows per inch. So this knits up really quickly. Even though it's like a longer body, I think it hits sort of just past my hips. I've tried to make it like a longer length. It's still knit up really quickly. Relatively speaking, especially compared to a fingering weight jumper or 4-ply weight jumper, which is what I usually knit, which does take a lot longer. So I've knit the sleeve and I tried it on and I'm really happy with it, except I did sort of design the sleeve to hit a certain point on my arm. I wanted it to hit sort of just past my wrist bone, so that it would go past there and then kind of sit just here on the top of my hand. I wanted it to be a bit more of a cozy fit. Yeah, that was what I was aiming for. And then when I tried it on, it didn't hit there. It kind of hits here. So it's like probably half an inch shorter than I thought it was going to be, maybe a little bit more. And then I thought, I wonder why that is. And then I realized that because this hasn't been blocked yet and it is going to grow a little bit, that's probably the reason. Because if you think about it, if when this grows, at the moment, the shoulder is kind of here on the jumper, but then when it grows width-wise, it's going to drop the shoulder further down. So I reckon that the shoulder is actually going to start there, which is going to be the sort of arm width. And so it will drop the length of the sleeve by about roughly about that much, I'm hoping, if it matches the measurements that I've planned for it to be. So I'm going to block it once I've finished it and try it on, and I'm hoping that the whole thing sort of loosens up and becomes more drapey, and that this lengthens a little bit. Otherwise, I'm really happy with it. I'm happy with the way the cable and the motif goes sort of across the front. I wasn't sure at first when I designed it, like how wide it should be. I didn't know whether I wanted it to take up sort of the entire front, or if I wanted it to be like a little bit in a little bit, so that it still had like plain stockinette sides that you could see. I went with that. I went with the plainer sides and the slightly narrower motif, and I think it's worked really well. I really like it. Um, and there's also one other thing I wanted to discuss. It was about the sleeves. So the sleeves that I had shown you, I think 2 episodes ago on the podcast, I had decided to add the cable. So this cable that's on the front, I had decided to add it to the sleeves as well, from here onwards. And that was the plan. And I was going to have sort of the cable and then a bit of a motif down the sides and then stockinette stitch. And as I was knitting it, I just thought, because I did start that way, and I just wasn't 100% happy with it, just because this is so, or rather, this is so plain. And I thought, I think it would be nicer and sort of more elegant and understated if it was plain everywhere apart from just on the motif on the front. I did add the Vickle braid again, just on the sleeve edge, and yeah, and I will do on the other one. So there's a little bit of that going on, but apart from that, I thought it would just look nicer if it was just yeah, if it was just plain. I just think it looks sort of more elegant. Saying that, what I have decided to do is, so I'm also knitting the cardigan, which I have not made much progress on since last week. And I said last time that I'm intending to make those 2 patterns for the jumper and the cardigan kind of interchangeable when it comes to the patterning. So this is very plain. That has like a texture all the way across the whole jumper, the cardigan, sorry. And what I'm planning on the cardigan is probably doing the motif down the sides, and having some texture on the sleeves as well. And I know it's got, like I showed you, it's got a little bit of ribbing on the body, and it will do down the sleeve probably as well. So I think I'm sort of knitting it quite organically while still having in mind what I would like. So I do know how I want it to look, but I'm not above making changes and tweaks along the way. But it's coming along nicely. The pattern is coming along. But I do think that if these 2 patterns were sort of interchangeable, then it would give you sort of more value for buying both of them, because you would be able to kind of mix and match. So for example, if you decided I'd actually really like the jumper to be more textured, I'd like it to have the motif down the arm, I'd prefer, maybe you'd want to buy the pattern and just have one plain jumper, like I mentioned, that I'm going to knit, just a very plain, sort of elegant wardrobe staple without any of the motif. But then you wanted to also knit this, but have the details from the cardigan. That's, I want the two to be like to cross over that way, so you can use both at the same time with the cardigan. If you wanted to knit it plain, or if you wanted to have like the motif on two sides, but then have the texture. Sorry, not have the texture and just have it more plain. Say you wanted it to be a more formal piece rather than something that's more casual, then that would also be an option. So that's my plan anyway. I think it looks nice both ways. So I really like how this looks, just with the plain stockinette stitch and the motif down the front. I think the panel looks really nice. It's sort of nice. It's just like the right width for me, and it really makes the cable stand out in the middle as well. I also wanted to show you my sleeve method. So when I knit sleeves, what I do is I will follow the pattern. So in this instance, it was my own pattern. So I wrote down all the pattern details. I wrote down the method for knitting the sleeves. And so I followed that, and I added stitch markers along it. And so if I was knitting another designer's pattern, I would just follow the instructions, but I would add stitch markers along the way. And these stitch markers help me to be able to read this sleeve basically and copy it, so that I make an exact duplicate sleeve when I knit the other sleeve. So in this instance, this is the right sleeve that I've knit. So when I go to knit the left sleeve, I will copy this, and I'll show you how I do it. So the first thing I do is I will add a stitch marker to the stitch just below the first stitch that I pick up, because you pick up and knit stitches around the arm hole. So I think it's called an arm side. So I will put a stitch marker just there, and that will show me the very start of the stitches for the sleeve. So then I will pick up and knit one stitch, and I will keep knitting up until whatever the pattern says. So usually a pattern will say knit straight for X number of inches or X number of rows. So I did that. I knit straight for X number of rows, or inches actually. I try and do everything in inches. And then I added, and then you decrease. You do a decrease row. So I added a stitch marker to mark my decrease row. And then the pattern will say something like decrease every X number of rows or X number of inches, Y number of times. So you know that you have to do so many decreases along the length of the arm, and you have to do them every so often, every however many inches. And so that's what I did again. So I marked my first decrease, and then my second after I'd knit that many rows, and then my third, and I just kept going. And I usually use I use different colors for different purposes. So my stitch marker for the very first one, to show me from where I start measuring the arm and the stitches, the sleeves, is one color. So in this case, it's like turquoise. And then all the decrease ones up until the penultimate one, which in this instance, they're all red, and this one is green, and that's because I ran out of red markers and I couldn't be bothered to get up and get another red marker. So I knew what this was, so I just left it there. But what I usually do is that would be red. They'd all be red, and then I get to my last one, and that would be a different color. And so I know that that is my last decrease round. And then it will tell you from that decrease round knit straight for X number of rows, if that's what your pattern says. So in this instance, I wanted everyone to be able to customize the sleeve length. So if you decrease to that point, if you wanted your sleeves to be shorter, you've got this to play with. So you could omit this whole section if you wanted to and just start the ribbing. Or if you wanted to make it longer, you could just increase the length of this. There's so many ways to customize this. You could make the ribbing longer, you could make the ribbing shorter, you could make this a bit longer and the ribbing shorter and keep the same sleeve length, but it's up to you. But anyway, so this is how I knit the sleeve. And then when I go to knit my left sleeve, I will just copy this exact method, but rather than have to look at my notes, I can look at my sleeve. So I can look at this and I can say, okay, how many rows did I knit in between these two markers? Because the thing is, say your pattern said knit straight for 3 inches. You could knit straight for 3 inches and have a certain number of rows here. And then on your next sleeve, maybe you're having like a slightly off day or you're stretching your sleeve a bit more or something, and then it says knit for 3 inches. You knit 3 inches, but you actually end up knitting 2 rows less. So it's much more accurate if you mark off where where you started your decrease round, so that you can mark the number of rows that you knit, what 3 inches is for you at your gauge on your sleeve. Then at least if you duplicate this, even if it has a mistake in it, if you duplicate it on the other sleeve, at least you've got 2 sleeves that are exactly the same. And in the end, it will seem like you didn't make a mistake, it was intentional. Maybe they were a little bit longer or a little bit shorter than the pattern said, but at least they're longer and shorter at the same place. And so you can just tailor your sleeves to suit, rather than having one that's a bit shorter, one that's a bit longer, one that's wider at the top, one that's narrower at the top, So anyway, I will just count the number of rows that I did from the base marker to the first one, and I will knit that number of rows on my other sleeve. Then I'll see, okay, there's a decrease round here, so I'll do a decrease round. I'll put a stitch marker. What I usually do is I will transfer my stitch markers. That has been like a good method for me. I don't know if it will work for everyone, but I would knit sort of this number of rows, and then I would do a decrease round, and I would take the stitch marker off here. First, I would count how many rows are up here in between these 2 markers. Then I would take my stitch marker off. I would put it on my next sleeve, the other sleeve, and then I would knit the next number of rows to the decrease round. And so I end up transferring all of my markers from this sleeve to the next sleeve. But that's not necessary. You don't have to do it that way. You can just put stitch markers on both sleeves. That way you can like count along and see that you've done it right. But that's just a method that works for me. So I just copy my sleeve, and that's another way. If you can read your knitting, you'll be able to make this process go much more smoothly and evenly, in that you can completely exactly duplicate this on your other sleeve without having to keep reading the pattern and keep wondering, oh, what did I do on that one? I can't remember. If you use stitch markers, you'll be able to see your progress very clearly. So yes, I think that's everything I was going to tell you about the jumper. Yeah. So now I'm going to just jump into my next work in progress, and that is the cardigan. Like I said, I didn't really knit that much on the cardigan. I think I have made some progress though. Yeah. So this is how much I've done so far. And it's very similar to the last time I showed it to you, but I realized that I did knit probably 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I've knit like 2 pattern repeats since I last showed you this, because I think this was shorter last time. So that cable is just a little bit longer. And it's nice because now as the cables are getting longer, you can kind of see the pattern developing nicely on the 2 fronts of the cardigan and they mirror each other nicely. And it's funny because I thought, because usually with cables, you kind of reverse them on both sides so that they're symmetric, they're kind of symmetrical. Is that the word? They reflect each other on both sides so that they look even. So I did try to do that with this cable, and then I realized that they were just pointing totally the wrong way. So this makes it really easy because the cable is exactly the same on both sides. You don't have to change it. It looks way better than when I tried to reverse them, reflect them. Yeah. So yeah. So that makes this pattern really easy because you don't need to remember 2 separate cable patterns. Um, so yeah, like I said, I'm going to try and match the texture, match the dimensions to the jumper, and then make those 2 patterns kind of interchangeable. And that should give you a huge variety then of patterns that you can knit with those 2. Bearing in mind you can switch the um, texture around, and you can also just knit them plain. What I'm trying to make these are like oversized jumpers that are very oversized, understated, that you can wear as like a really cozy casual piece, or you can omit some of the texture and have it a little bit more sort of formal or like elegant, simple, or you can omit the pattern altogether and just have it as like a classic wardrobe staple. And then there's like the extra details like the Vickle braids that I put on the um, cuffs and on the neckline, that you can microphone, sorry, that you can include. Or you can omit them if you just want something that's just very, very classic. So yeah, so I think I'm very happy with this pattern because I can get a lot of different styles out of the same thing, which is what I'm going for. Um, so yeah, so that is my jumper, my cardigan, and then I want to show you my next work in progress. So yeah, so my next work in progress is a sock. Um, I decided that I wanted to work on my jumper. I wanted to finish the sleeves. That was my goal for last week, for this week. That was my goal last week for this week. And like I said, it didn't happen. I did get half of one done, but not the whole sleeve, not both sleeves, because I wanted to cast on this sock. I just got, when you just get really excited and you just desperately want to knit something and you're not going to be happy with your knitting until you start on it. So um, mine was a sock. I don't know, I haven't knit socks for ages, and I just thought I really would like to knit a pair. Um, I think it's probably because I was watching a podcast and someone had knit a sock, and I thought, oh, I miss sock knitting. I usually have, like I told you before, I usually have a pair of socks on the needles all the time, but I haven't had one that I can just pick up and knit on. I have got the one that I showed you from Cornwall. Those are still in progress because I need to refer to the pattern, and I just haven't had the sort of time or the headspace to be looking at a pattern reading it and knitting at the same time. I've needed to knit on things that are quite straightforward, that I can just refer to quickly, and then I can knit a big section and then refer to it again later. And these socks were perfect. So the texture pattern is something that I just came up with. I just wanted a very simple knit purl stitch. I think I just Googled it. I just Googled, like, because I wanted it to look like flecks, like there were little flecks on the sock. And I think it was something like a fleck stitch or something like that. And yeah, I found a pattern. I found a stitch pattern. So I thought, oh, I'll just use that. It's a very simple knit purl pattern. I think it's like a 4-row repeat. So I have knit in the past. I think, oh, I can't remember which pair of socks it was, but the pattern that I used was the Hermione Everyday socks. I love that pattern. It is very pretty, and it breaks up a vanilla sock. So a vanilla sock is just a plain stockinette sock with very little else. It's got a cuff, it's got plain stockinette, it's got um, a heel of some kind. I'll go into that in a second. A foot and then a toe. Um, but it hasn't really got any pattern. It's just like a plain sock, and that is a brilliant place to start. If you want to start knitting socks, I would say get a good vanilla sock pattern. Find your foot measurement. You'll want to just work out how to knit a basic sock. You can do it in 2 ways. You can knit toe up, or like the method that I use, which is top down, cuff down. You can choose. I think the very first sock pattern that I knit was toe up, because I wanted to try it on as I went. And I think I may have knit 3 pairs of socks like that, and then every other pair I knit cuff down, because I realized that I just really liked that method. And also, once I had knit myself some socks and I knew the kind of length that I liked, and the kind of construction, like heel construction, that I liked and things, and also the number of rows, for example, that I had in the foot and in the leg, I just realized that I didn't really need to change the construction, or I didn't have to continue with the toe up. So usually, often there are different reasons why you would want to knit from the bottom up when it comes to a sock. So if you knit from the toe up, you can start off with a cast on that you like. Some people really don't like sewing up the toe. If they knit top down, they don't like it when they get to the toe and they have to do like the Kitchener stitch, or like the star toe. They just feel like it's not secure enough, or it's not what they want to do. They would prefer to create. There are some methods where you can create fabric where you have like a seamless toe, so that it doesn't rub or anything around the foot. So some people do it for that reason. Other people do it because they want to use, but well, they don't know how long they want their sock to be. Maybe it's the first time, or you've got a certain amount of yarn and you just don't know how long you want the sock to come to on your leg. So they will knit and they will keep trying on the sock at the same time, and they'll get to a stage where they're happy with the sock and they'll bind off there. And then other people have yarn that they really like, and they want to use every scrap of that yarn in their socks. So maybe what they'll do is they'll have a ball of yarn, they'll split it in 2, and then they will knit toe up both of those socks, and they'll just keep going until they have finished every little scrap of that yarn. And that way they can utilize the entire bit of the entire ball or skein of yarn, and finish their socks. So usually you need, well, you can buy 100 sock yarn. Usually comes in a 100-gram ball or skein. You don't usually use 100 grams for a pair of socks. Even my husband, who has got very large feet, when I knit his socks, I still had yarn left from a 100-gram skein. I think I knit them in West Yorkshire Spinners. It was Mallard, their bird colourways, and I did do him because I wasn't sure. I did do him contrasting cuff, heel, and toe. I did it in like a navy blue. The socks looked brilliant, but I didn't have to do that because there was enough yarn where I could still knit his socks, um, like from the whole ball. My feet are much smaller. I've got a UK size 5 foot, so I don't have to knit for very long. I'm nearly finished my foot. I think I'm ready for the toe. I haven't measured yet, but yeah, it's easier for me. So I'm never gonna use 100 grams to knit myself a pair of socks, even if I don't do contrasting cuffs, heels, and toes. Um, what I will usually do is I'll knit a pair either with contrasting or without. It just means that I'll have extra yarn left over at the end, and I will use that yarn to either add stripes to another pair of socks or use that to add the contrasting bits to another sock. So maybe you want to do like a plain sock next time, and then you can, oh, sorry, maybe because this is obviously plain. So say I had yarn left over from this, maybe I would want to use a self-striping sock yarn or a patterned sock yarn, a variegated yarn, and then I would do solid, like in this yarn, um, cuffs, heels, and toes, and vice versa. So that's a great way to use up your scraps, is to use them in socks. And it adds that contrast just adds like a really fun pop or bit of interest to a pair of socks. And socks, I feel like, are a really great way for knitters, especially conservative knitters, to express themselves. Because I think I've said it in the past, I don't knit with a huge deal of colour. I mean, this jumper, I thought that these two colours go really nicely together. They're brilliant autumnal, wintry colours, sort of the dark olive and this sort of chocolatey brown. But I have been known to get really brightly coloured, pretty variegated yarn for socks because socks are like your little like secret fun thing that you're wearing. Usually they're in boots or in shoes, and then when you go around to somebody's house, for example, you take your shoes off and or your boots off, and there's like this little pop of colour. And in the UK, we're used to wearing black, or like more like darker colours. Generally speaking, obviously not everyone's like that, but I definitely think people gravitate towards wearing brighter colours more and more because we're so used to seeing darker, more dull, more neutral colours. And it's just like for many reasons and history and everything. But I think that socks are a great way if you are a conservative knitter or a conservative color wearer. I don't know if you don't wear a lot of color. Knitting colorful socks. This is not a good example, but knitting colorful socks like this is a really good place to start because then you've got some color on and you can show it if you want to or not. But anyway, back to these socks. I just Googled, like I said, a stitch pattern. I was very happy because this stitch pattern is very simple. I think it's like a four row repeat. Um, very simple to memorize, and it gives you this lovely texture. And as soon as I started knitting this up in the brown, I thought this looks like a chocolate digestive biscuit or a chocolate covered hobnob. If you're from the UK, you'll know what I mean, but it's just like a chocolate um, cookie, which has like been enrobed. Yeah, it's a cookie that has been enrobed in chocolate. The cookie is um, the cookie is oat usually. I think, yeah, a digestive is, it's got oats and wheat in it. Hobnob's the same, but then it has like on one side of it, it's got milk chocolate or dark chocolate, and I have to say that dark chocolate digestive biscuits are some of my favorite in the world, dunked in some tea. Um, so yes, I saw this and I loved it immediately, and I showed my husband and I said to Bob, "What do you think? Do you think this looks like a chocolate covered digestive biscuit?" And he said, "Totally, it absolutely does." And I just thought, my handle is Tealand Knits and Tealand and biscuits dunked in tea. I just thought it was a great pattern to choose, and I probably will write up the pattern for these because I think it's such a simple one. It's a great texture one, and it will go great with variegated, colourful, indie dyed yarn or self-striping yarn. It will just like add a little bit of interest. And also, if you don't enjoy knitting stockinette stitch the whole time, if you don't enjoy knitting a plain vanilla sock, um, then this is a great way to break that up because it's very, very simple to knit, but it adds that little bit of texture so that your final sock will will look, it can, I really find that texture like this makes the yarn stand out even more than if you just knit it plain. Somehow it kind of makes it pop and gives it like a nice effect. So what did I want to tell you about this? Very simple, really. So the thing about, I really like to have socks with me to knit with. I like to put them in a little project bag and carry them with me when I'm out and about, because if you ever find that you've got some time, say you're sat in the car waiting for somebody, or you're waiting for someone in a coffee shop, something like that. If you can take out your little tiny knitting projects like this sock, and I can just knit on it when I'm just sat there, it just gives you something to do, and it helps me. The thing about knitting is that it helps me to feel productive. Um, Even when I've got some spare time, I really need something. I need to do something with my hands. So to be able to knit along on my socks and know that I'm making something that I'm going to use or that I'm going to give away that's going to be useful for someone else, it really helps me to pass the time in a like more acceptable way. I don't know, for my brain anyway. Um, so yes, what can I tell you about this? So I told you about vanilla socks. If you haven't knit socks before, it's great to look up a vanilla sock, a plain stockinette stitch sock, basically, and work out the method that you like. Maybe you want to knit toe up. If you want to knit cuff down, like I do, um, one of the reasons people would want to do that is because they can start off with a nice stretchy cuff if you choose the right if you choose the right cast on, because sometimes the cuff can be not so stretchy if you cast off, if you bind off on the cuff. So some people like it for that because they like to have like a nice stretchy cuff. Others like it because they can they already know how long they want the cuff to be, and they like to they like to customize the toe with either the Kitchener stitch or the star toe, and they can change it the way that they like. I personally, oh, and also the heel, the type of heel that you want will affect that whether you like to knit toe up or cuff down. So I personally, I have I have like high arches. So that means that I like to knit a slightly larger gusset. So the gusset is this triangular part here. And that is what you knit to accommodate, because your foot is not like a completely, obviously completely flat. It sticks out at a right angle where your heel is, and then the top of your foot and around your ankle. That all needs to be accommodated. So you knit a tube. This is for your leg. You knit a tube for your foot, but in the middle you have to create this heel flap. So pretend the foot didn't exist. So you knit down the leg, you knit to your like where your ankle starts, like the back of your heel, and then you knit the heel flap, and you knit from sort of the top of your ankle down to the bottom of your heel. And then you do something called a heel turn, and that's this part here, where it's just like magic. It's amazing. You just suddenly end up with this curve that fits your heel into it, like a little pocket for your heel. And then you pick up stitches around the heel flap, and then you decrease stitches until you reach the same stitch count. Usually in a standard sock, you reach the same stitch count as you do for your leg on your foot. And that's what causes the triangle, because you start off with a large number of stitches and then you decrease down to a smaller number here. And so this is what I do. I use the stitch marker method again, the same as my sleeves, and I just mark where I finish my gusset decreases. So this is the gusset. So once I hit the same stitch count as I have on my leg, then I add a stitch marker, and then I add a stitch marker every 10 stitches. And I think this roughly translates to about 1 inch, because I'm knitting on 2.25mm needles, which is a US, hold on, it is on here and it's just hard to see, a US 1. So they're very, very small needles. Yeah, so it's about 1 inch. And so I just keep knitting, and then I will knit until I get to like 2 inches before my toe, and then I will knit the toe area. I say 2 inches, but I'm still working out my toe method. So what did I want to say? Oh yes. So I'm just doing this pattern, this texture. It's around the leg, and then it's around the foot, and the base of the foot is just in stockinette, and so it's the heel, because obviously when you're walking, you don't want to be walking on texture particularly. You want it to be nice and smooth and flat. So socks 99% of the time, I would say, have like a nice smooth stockinette bottom. And yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that this is not like a stitch pattern that I invented. I don't know, are any? Like this cable is not one that I invented, but it's what you do with it. It's like the way that you put things together. Like obviously this moss stitch or double moss stitch is not something that I've made up, and no one can kind of claim that. But this stitch pattern, it's really hard to find out whether a stitch pattern kind of has been used before on a sock or whatever. But I think I've done enough to with the cuff and some of the detail, and I've got something in mind for the toe. I think I've done enough for it to be like a unique pattern on its own. Yeah, I think in the knitting community, everyone kind of understands that there are a finite number of stitch patterns. It's what you do with them and how you style them that makes a garment unique. So yeah, so I think I will write up the pattern for this. I've got something in mind for the toe, which I haven't obviously executed yet, but yeah, I think I really like these. I really like the biscuitness of them. So that's work in progress number 3. But once I've done one sock, I'm hoping that the next one will fly along a bit more easily, because it doesn't actually take even though it's a lot of stitches. I was just watching a podcast today, and it was a ridiculous number of stitches that they estimate goes into a standard pair of socks. I can't remember what that is, but yeah, I think they fly along because it's so mindless. You can just keep going and not sort of have to think about it. So my socks. And something else that I wanted to show you. I've just been meaning to sit here and knit while I was talking to you. And I've been so distracted because I realize that I gesture so much when I'm talking that I can't keep my hands, well, not still, because when you're knitting, they're not still, but I can't keep my hands from moving. So my intention is to sit here and like knit along while I'm talking to you. But I just haven't been able to do it because I just keep gesturing. And I didn't realize that I gestured that much until I tried to do this. Although I am in a lot of Zoom and Teams meetings online. And it's really funny. I do realize I gesture now because I have a MacBook, and the software, the iOS software on Teams somehow seems to, it has like a special mode where if you do this, it thinks that you're trying to say party. So I usually say like one thing, second thing, and then all of these balloons like suddenly go up in the air and makes everyone laugh, and it's like very entertaining in the meeting. But we've always got balloons going off because I'm always gesturing. And then also I'll do this, and suddenly there's like a thumbs up and stuff on the screen. So yeah, I do gesture a lot. So I have not been able to get much knitting done in this podcast, even though that was my intention. But I'm going to try and do it because I feel like it slows me down a little bit. I know that I have the tendency to talk a bit quickly, and yeah, this just helps it to be a bit more relaxed, because we like knitting along with each other as well. It like gives us a bit more of that sense of community. So yes, I had a lot to talk to you about, but I feel like I have been talking for quite a while, so I think I might save that for next week, actually. One thing I wanted to discuss it was to talk about gauge swatches, because I realized that I have mentioned gauge swatches quite a few times in the last few episodes. But if you don't know what it is, or whether it's really that important, it's kind of meaningless. The words are kind of meaningless. So I thought I must discuss them a bit so that we can see like what a gauge swatch is, and why we would or wouldn't use them. But I think I will save that for next week because I've been talking so long. But one thing I do want to show you before I go is something I've been talking about for a couple of weeks now. And that is my yarn management device. So I was so excited to receive this. I put it together as soon as I got it, and wanted to test it out straight away. So I have knit this whole sock using this like method of having my yarn set up. So basically, this eliminates the ball rolling around on the floor. So if you have been here and watched a few of my previous episodes, you will know that I have I knit this jumper in the wrong size. I got my calculations wrong and I knit it to a different width, and I had to frog the entire jumper, and so I rolled the yarn into balls. And the balls are great, but they just roll around everywhere. I have to what I end up doing is like unwinding a bit, knitting, getting to the end, and then unwinding a bit more so that the ball doesn't move around everywhere. Otherwise, it's just rolling all over the floor. It's like gone all the way up the room before, and yeah. But this eliminates that issue. So this is, I'll show you. So it's like a cradle, basically, with a very large base. And it has this nice curved holder. And then it's got a spindle, and you just pop the yarn on there, the ball. And then this has got a magnet on it. There's a magnet in here. And it just hangs on there. And what you do is you just pull the yarn from the ball as you're knitting, and it's very gentle, and it just comes off like that. And the nice thing is that it doesn't get caught. So I don't have one, but when I was looking into getting some sort of yarn management system, I did see that there are these sort of, not as long as this, but it's slightly different look. But this spindle kind of thing, there are ones that sit in a stationary cup. Sorry. Yes, so it sits in like a stationary cup. And what happens is that as you're knitting, the yarn can get stuck in between the like the spindly thing and the base. And what you have to do is you have to take it out, you have to untangle it every now and then, and it becomes very frustrating. And what I would be worried about is that I pulled it too hard and it would snap the yarn or something like that, and that would be a pain. So I looked into the reviews and the comments, and there was a lady, I mentioned her before, her handle is The Secret Yarnery. And she mentioned this yarn holder, but she did also have a modification that she made to it, which I did as well. So you see here, that is a magnet that wasn't on the original. So the original, just kind of, you can't see the magnet. The magnet is there, but it's recessed up into here, and it just looks like a flat disc. And then this is just the same. I haven't modified this, and you just stick it on there. But I only knit with this so far. This is all I've tested out on it, and it's only a 50 gram. It started off as a 50 gram ball of yarn. Now it's probably like 15 or something. But some people knit with, so this would accommodate a 100 gram yarn ball, and I think up to 200 grams, I think. I'm not 100% sure. But some people will knit with over 200 gram like cakes of yarn, like the very large ones. This will not accommodate those in the state that you get it from the manufacturer, because the magnet is not strong enough. So people will put their yarn cake onto the spindle and they'll start knitting, and it will fall off and drop onto the base like that. So what the Secret Yarnery said was, if you get these magnets, they're like a certain magnet that will be strong enough, you can then attach the spindle, and you can move it like as much as you like. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. You can almost move it to a 90-degree angle and it won't fall off. And then she's tested it with like heavier balls of yarn and heavier cakes, and they've all been fine. They haven't dropped off. Um, but what I've found is that when I give the yarn a good tug, sometimes this will swing around, but it doesn't fall off. So it's been really stable. I always prefer to over engineer anything that I make, or I always try and buy things that are the strongest because I just don't want to break them. I don't want to go through the hassle of having to get them fixed. So I just bought the magnets and it has just done an excellent job. I've got nothing to complain about. I did find that when I knit with this on the floor, I was sort of tugging on it a bit more. And that is just me, that's just the angle. Can you see? Like if you're pulling up, it is sort of pulling at a different angle. And I'm obviously doing it very slowly just to show you there. But if you're doing it quite fast, it goes quicker, but it creates a bit more tension. But the best way I've found to position this is next to you. Or actually, when I'm like, say that I'm just sat on my bed, like having a bit of a relax and knitting, if I have it right in front of me, and I'm just sort of pulling on it like this, it's perfect. So same level or slightly lower, I've found that is the best angle. Up, having it further up is not good. I don't think pulling down on it is a good like it's not a good direction. But pulling straight is much better, and pulling up is not too bad, but like I said, to the side of you or straight ahead of you is best. But I would totally recommend this. I think it would stand up to a lot of motion, or like taking it, putting it in different places, taking it around the house with you. I have seen somebody review it or review something like it in a car, and they said it was okay, but I think again it was the direction, like pulling it um, from off the floor. It was like a little bit harder, but it still did work. Um, but I have something else that I would use when I'm out and about, but I will show you that another time because I actually haven't set it up yet. Um, and I do want to do that. I just want to show you how I would add my ball of yarn to the spindle. So this is Drops Nord. I think it's Drops Nord Chestnut Brown, something like that. This is just another Drops Nord yarn. And what I would do is I would just get like make a little hole in the bottom of it and then put the yarn all through. There we go. And then it's on there. Obviously, take the ball band off and then you just start with it. Initially, it can be like just while it's working out the the tension and stuff. It can be slightly erratic, but not so that you can't knit with it. And what I also do is I usually just squish it down a little bit so it's more like a ball rather than the sort of, what shape is that? Elongated shape that you get. But yeah, I would really recommend them. Just Google or go on Amazon or AliExpress or somewhere wherever, and just I think it's magnetic yarn holder. I like this one because it's wood as well. I just prefer it to plastic. And I've seen with the wooden ones, you can get a couple of different colors. You can get like a natural wood, and then this is the darker wood. So I usually will go for the darker. That's just like my aesthetic. I prefer it. But yeah, totally recommend it. And I'm hoping that it will really help me with my colour work as well, because I'm hoping when I do that and I've got two on the go that it will stop the yarn from getting tangled. And the other thing I would really like to do in future is to get some extra spindles. Because if I had like maybe 3 or 4 in rotation, then I could have different projects on the same 2 holders. So that's the goal anyway. I don't know. Don't know how much more knitting paraphernalia and stuff I can get without it taking over the house. But anyway, so I think that's everything. I am going to leave the rest till next week. But yeah, my goals for this week, whether or not I can achieve them, are to finish the second sleeve of this jumper, finish my sock, finish at least one of the socks, and then hopefully knit a bit more on the cardigan so that I can see the pattern come through and have more of an idea of what it's going to look like. So so that's me. So until next week then, I hope you have a great week. Thank you very much again for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing, for recommending this to your friends, and for joining me on my podcasting journey. So thank you again. Have a lovely week. Happy knitting, and until next time, bye.